Deserts once cradled thriving cities, and arid lands burst with life. This was not magic, but a mastery of water so profound its engineering lay hidden for ages. We are finally piecing together that global puzzle, reconstructing the hidden water systems of ancient civilizations. By the end, you will possess a new lens for viewing human history, one where every empire was built on a foundation of ingenious plumbing. How did Roman engineers move rivers across stone arches for dozens of miles? What secret tunnels allowed Persian gardens to flourish in the sand? We will uncover the methods that turned scarcity into staggering abundance, from subterranean aqueducts to monumental reservoirs. Yet this is more than an archaeological detective story. As our own climate shifts and water becomes ever more precious, these ancient blueprints for survival hold urgent lessons for our future. They challenge our assumptions about technology and resilience. What forgotten wisdom from the past could be the key to navigating our own uncertain tomorrow? The evidence often arrives not from a trench in the earth, but from a pixel on a screen. A researcher studying satellite photographs might notice a faint, straight line cutting across a parched landscape, a geometric scar that nature would never make. This is how the hunt begins today, with technology peeling back layers of time to reveal what our eyes on the ground could never see. The very word hidden in our title carries a double meaning. These systems were not built as secret vaults to be locked away. Instead, their concealment is a story of adaptation, efficiency, and finally, silence. To understand why they vanished from view is to understand the brilliant logic of their creation. In the scorching deserts of Persia, for instance, the greatest engineering marvel was built entirely underground. The Qanat was a gently sloping tunnel dug back into a mountain aquifer that guided water for miles entirely by gravity, emerging at the surface only where it was needed to feed a village or a lush garden. This was not secrecy for its own sake. It was pure, elegant pragmatism. By burying the water channel, Persian engineers solved two critical problems at once. They protected the precious liquid from evaporating under the relentless sun, and they shielded the lifeline of their community from potential sabotage or conquest. The system was so effective, so seamlessly woven into the bedrock, that when empires eventually shifted, knowledge of its maintenance could fade. The Qanat did not disappear, it simply waited, a silent artery in the earth. Other systems hid in plain sight through integration. The sophisticated canals and raised fields of the Maya or the Khmer were so perfectly attuned to their local hydrology that they became part of the landscape itself. When those societies underwent periods of change, the forests and floods reclaimed the structures not as ruins but as natural features. Their original purpose, the conscious human design behind them, was erased. This presents our core puzzle. We are not discovering a single, intact machine. We are assembling a ghost from whispers. The evidence is fragmentary, a broken ceramic pipe here, a sediment-filled channel there, a line in an ancient text describing a fountain that no longer flows. How do we move from these scattered clues to a coherent blueprint? The reconstruction is a grand collaboration, a conversation between the trowel and the satellite, between the soil scientist and the software engineer. It requires reading the land like a historical document, interpreting subtle changes in soil chemistry, pollen deposits, and even the shapes of stones. This multidisciplinary detective story is our only path to hearing the water flow again, to understanding the quiet genius that sustained civilizations for centuries. And as we begin to listen, we must first visit the place where this global story of hydraulic ingenuity finds one of its most iconic and enduring expressions. The ghost of a water system whispers loudest in the ruins of a city built with logic. In the fertile plains of the Indus River, over 4,000 years ago, arose a civilization whose greatest monument was not a pyramid or a palace, but a sewer. The cities of Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa were marvels of urban planning, with streets laid out in precise grids, but their true genius flowed beneath the feet of every citizen. Here, the hidden engineering was not buried to evade the sun or an enemy, but integrated into the very fabric of daily life as a public good. In nearly every home, archaeologists have found bathrooms with brick floors that sloped toward a drain. These private drains connected to a network of covered channels that ran under the main streets, all leading to larger conduits that carried waste and rainwater safely outside the city walls. This was not a luxury for the elite, it was a standard feature, a civic priority etched in baked clay and bitumen. Think about what this represents. In a time we often imagine as primitive, an entire society made advanced sanitation a shared value. It required astonishing coordination, precise surveying so that gravity did all the work, and a communal commitment to maintenance. Archaeologists like Dr. Jonathan Mark Kenoyer point out that this system was as much about social order as it was about hydraulics. In a densely populated urban center, preventing illness from contaminated water was a matter of survival. The covered drains kept streets clean and minimized public health challenges, reflecting a collective understanding that the well-being of the individual was tied to the health of the whole city. This was gravity-fed engineering in service of a social contract. Yet, for all its sophistication, this system too was lost not to conquest but to time and shifting rivers. The eventual decline of the Indus Valley cities and the relentless silt of the great river slowly buried this hydraulic latticework. For centuries, the full complexity of this achievement lay hidden, just layers of earth away. Its rediscovery forces a profound question. What kind of organizational mind, what shared principles, allowed such a uniform and advanced system to be implemented across an entire civilization? The Indus Valley set a stunning precedent, a high bar for communal water management that was public, equitable, and woven into the urban blueprint. But this was only one answer to the universal challenge of water. As civilizations rose in different landscapes under different pressures, they would devise their own ingenious and often breathtakingly bold solutions. While the Indus built for the city, another civilization was engineering for the field on a staggering scale. Between the twin rivers of the Tigris and Euphrates, water was not a convenience, it was the very author of history. Here in Mesopotamia, the world's first great agricultural surplus was not a gift of nature, but a calculated victory over it. The rivers provided life, but their floods were ferocious and unpredictable, arriving at the wrong time for the grain crops Sumerian farmers sought to grow. So they did something radical. They began to redirect the rivers themselves, carving vast networks of canals that stretched like artificial veins across the plain. This was the birth of large-scale irrigation, a technological leap that turned seasonal deluges into a disciplined, year-round resource. It allowed populations to soar and the world's first cities, like Uruk and to rise from the mud brick. But this control came with a profound responsibility, one that would reshape human society forever. Digging a canal was only the beginning. The real challenge was management. Water had to be shared fairly among thousands of farms, a task that required bureaucracy, measurement, and law. The slope of each channel had to be precise. Too steep and the water would erode the canal bed. Too shallow and silt would choke it. This constant battle against sedimentation, against the very land reclaiming its waterways, demanded relentless communal labor. The stakes of this system were so high that they were etched into stone. The famous Code of Hammurabi, one of humanity's oldest legal documents, is not just a list of crimes and punishments. It is, in many ways, a water management manual. Specific laws detailed the responsibilities of farmers to maintain their section of the communal canal. If a man was negligent and let his bank collapse, flooding his neighbor's field, he had to compensate the loss. Water rights were property rights. This formalized a revolutionary idea that the collective resource required collective governance, binding society together with rules written in clay. Yet, for all its sophistication, this system contained a tragic flaw the Mesopotamians could not see. The canal water they brought to their fields carried dissolved salts from the surrounding soil. Under the blistering sun, water would evaporate, leaving these salts behind in the earth. Season after season, century after century, this salt accumulated. Without adequate drainage to flush it away, the soil slowly became poisoned. Wheat, a sensitive crop, began to fail. Ancient records tell a story of declining yields, of farmers being forced to switch to more salt-tolerant barley, and eventually of entire regions being abandoned. Their greatest achievement, irrigation, carried the seeds of their agricultural decline. This presents a powerful and sobering lesson. The Mesopotamians mastered the hydraulic equation of delivery, but they did not fully solve the equation of removal. Their story is a stark reminder that engineering a landscape is a dialogue with ecology, not a monologue of control. It asks us a reflective question that echoes into our own era. When we alter a natural system on a grand scale, how do we anticipate the slow, silent consequences that might unfold over generations? Their canals fed empires, but the salt in the soil whispers a cautionary tale about the long-term cost of bending a river to our will. A line of circular scars marches across an empty desert, each one a dark mouth leading deep into the earth. From the air, it looks like a mysterious code written upon the sand. On the ground, these vertical shafts descend to connect a hidden masterpiece, the Persian Qanat. This was not a structure built upward toward the sky, but a deliberate turn inward, a civilization choosing to solve its greatest challenge from within the landscape itself. The principle was one of elegant simplicity. Engineers would first locate a water-bearing layer, an aquifer, at the foot of a mountain. From that mother well, they would begin digging a gently sloping tunnel, just wide enough for a single worker, back toward their settlement dozens of miles away. Every 100 feet or so, they would dig a vertical shaft to the surface to remove excavated material and, crucially, to provide air for the diggers. The result was a subterranean river flowing silently and continuously by the unerring force of gravity alone. The genius was in its profound efficiency. Because the water traveled in darkness, protected from the relentless sun, evaporation was nearly eliminated. It emerged cool and clean at the village outlet, a miraculous spring born from meticulous calculation. Hydrologists today still marvel at the system. As expert Dr. Dale Lightfoot has noted, a Qanat is the ultimate sustainable technology. It taps only the natural recharge of the aquifer, never depleting the fossil water faster than it can be replenished by distant rainfall. It requires no pumps, no external power, just an intimate understanding of the land's hidden anatomy. But this engineering marvel was also a social one. Building a Qanat was a monumental undertaking that could take years, demanding not just diggers, but expert surveyors who could maintain that perfect, minuscule slope using nothing more than sighting rods and water levels. The knowledge was specialized, passed down through families. Once built, the Qanat bound the community together. Its maintenance was managed by cooperatives, with water shares distributed according to strict, time-honored rules. The health of the underground channel was everyone's responsibility, for it was quite literally the community's lifeline. This hidden network did more than water orchards, it shaped history. By creating stable oases in the most arid regions, Qanats became the pit stops of empire and commerce. A caravan could travel vast distances across the Iranian plateau, knowing that at regular intervals a reliable source of water awaited, thanks to that unseen tunnel below. In this way, the Qanat directly facilitated the flow of goods, ideas, and culture along routes like the Silk Road. It was infrastructure in its purest form, enabling connection across a harsh and unforgiving landscape. The Qanat stands as a powerful testament to a philosophy of working with nature's constraints, not against them. It represents a conversation with the earth, a patient, cooperative effort to reveal a resource without force. While Mesopotamia sought to conquer and redirect its rivers, Persia learned to listen to and guide the secret waters beneath the sand. This quiet, enduring technology invites a compelling comparison to another civilization that took water management to an even more monumental and public scale. The arches are merely the skeleton, the visible evidence of a deeper, relentless calculation. To bring a river from the mountains to a city's heart required a slope so gentle, so precise, it defies belief. Roman surveyors, using simple tools called chorobates and libellas, plotted courses over dozens of miles with a gradient often less than 1 foot of drop for every 1,000 feet of length. This was not about brute force, but about harnessing gravity with a surgeon's patience. The water channel itself, the Specus, was the true hidden masterpiece, a continuous, waterproof conduit that snaked across valleys and through hills. Its construction relied on a material that still mystifies modern chemists, Roman concrete, or opus cementitium. Unlike any concrete before it, this mixture of lime, volcanic ash, and rubble possessed a miraculous property. It could cure and harden underwater, forming an impervious seal that made tunnels through bedrock possible and reservoirs leak-proof. This was the unsung material that held the empire's lifeblood. But the engineering did not stop at delivery. Before water even entered the city, it passed through a series of quiet, clever filters. Large settling tanks or piscinae were built along the route. Here the flow would slow, allowing sand and sediment to sink to the bottom, ensuring only clear water continued its journey. This attention to quality, to the clarity of the public resource, speaks volumes about the Roman mindset. The final act of this hydraulic ballet occurred at the distribution castle, the Castellum Divisoria. This was a junction box of marble and lead, where the main aqueduct flow was divided into smaller pipes for different parts of the city. And here the Romans applied a strict social and practical hierarchy. The first and largest pipe went to the vital public services, the fountains and public baths that were the cornerstone of civic life. Next came the supply for private homes of the wealthy, and finally, whatever remained was directed to industrial uses like fulleries or tanneries. This was water managed by priority, a literal flow chart of Roman values. We know these intricate details largely thanks to one man, Sextus Julius Frontinus, the water commissioner for Rome in the late 1st century. Frustrated by the corruption and inefficiency he found, he wrote a detailed technical manual, De Aqueductu Urbis Rame. In it, he catalogued the size, course, and capacity of every aqueduct, railing against citizens who illegally tapped into the public lines. His work gives us a snapshot of a system run with bureaucratic precision, where the volume of water was measured and allocated, an early model of a public utility. This network was far more than plumbing. It was the circulatory system of Roman identity. The abundant public baths, the flowing fountains, the spectacular naumatia, or staged sea battles, all proclaimed a central tenet of Roman humanitas, the civilized life. Access to clean water for drinking, for hygiene, for leisure, was presented as a right and a benefit of Roman order. The aqueduct was a permanent stone declaration that civilization had tamed nature's chaos. Its skeletal arches, standing long after the empire fell, are haunting reminders of that ambition. They prompt us to reflect on the nature of legacy itself. The Romans did not just build for function, they built for symbol, crafting an infrastructure that defined their urban experience and projected imperial power across the landscape. Yet, for all its grandeur, this monumental system was ultimately fragile. dependent on a vast, centralized authority for its maintenance. When that authority fractured, the silent channels eventually fell silent too. This contrast between the enduring symbol and the vulnerable reality leads us to a very different ancient philosophy, one found not in the heart of an empire, but high in the mountains of another continent. Deep in the green cathedral of the jungle, water spoke the language of the gods. For the Maya, every raindrop was a divine gift from Chok, the storm deity, and every pool was a portal to the underworld, Xibalba. This was not a civilization that merely managed water. They conducted a sacred conversation with it. In cities like Tikal, rising from the limestone bedrock of present-day Guatemala, the challenge was stark. Despite heavy seasonal rains, the porous ground swallowed water quickly, leaving little for the long dry season. The Maya response was a masterpiece of foresight and faith. They transformed their entire cityscape into a vast catchment system. Plazas were not just public spaces, they were carefully graded and plastered to channel rainfall into immense, lined reservoirs. Rooftops funneled water into cisterns. Their engineering was precise, using volcanic ash to create waterproof cement that could seal these vital tanks. But the system went beyond simple storage. Archaeologists like Dr. Vernon Scarborough have mapped intricate canal networks at cities like Edzna and Palenque, channels that directed water for agriculture and even created moats for defense. At Palenque, they found evidence of a pressurized water feature, a fountain that likely adorned a royal courtyard, proving a sophisticated grasp of hydraulics. Yet to see this only as technical achievement misses the heart of the story. Water was the currency of political and spiritual power. As scholar Dr. Lisa Lucero has compellingly argued, Maya kings were not just rulers, they were divine intermediaries. Their primary duty was to ensure the arrival of the rains and the fullness of the reservoirs. A successful rainy season was proof of a king's sacred connection. A full reservoir was a symbol of his legitimacy. The control of water infrastructure, the ceremonial centers built around sacred springs, these were the pillars of royal authority. The engineering was thus embedded in ritual. A reservoir was not a tank, it was a cholton, often shaped and positioned with cosmological significance, a man-made cenote connecting the community to the gods below. This fusion of the practical and the spiritual created a powerful, resilient system for centuries. However, this very integration may have sown the seeds of vulnerability. When multi-year droughts gripped the region in the 9th century, as climate records from lake sediments show, the system faced a crisis it could not engineer its way out of. The reservoirs dried up. In this context, the king's sacred contract was broken. If the rituals failed to bring rain, if the portals to the gods held only dust, then the divine right to rule evaporated with the water. The resulting loss of faith could have shattered social order, accelerating the abandonment of classic Maya cities. Their story presents a profound and haunting question. When a society binds its survival, its politics, and its spirituality so completely to a single, fragile resource, what happens when that resource fails? The Maya teach us that water management is never a purely technical problem. It is a cultural narrative, a story a civilization tells itself about its place in the world. They built not just for thirst but for meaning, weaving their canals into the fabric of the cosmos. This perspective of water as a sacred participant in life stands in stark contrast to another approach, one that viewed water as a geometric puzzle to be solved with serene, almost mathematical harmony. The jungle canopy hides a geometry that only the sky can see. From the ground, Angkor is a breathtaking maze of temples and towering roots. But from above, with the penetrating eye of LIDAR technology, a different truth emerges. The entire landscape reveals itself as a meticulously planned hydraulic machine, the largest of its kind in the ancient world. The Khmer Empire did not simply build a city in the jungle. they redesigned the land itself to harness the violent, seasonal pulse of the monsoon. At the heart of this design were the barrays, colossal rectangular reservoirs that functioned like artificial inland seas. The largest, the West Barray, stretches over 5 miles long and 1 mile wide, a feat of earth-moving that still staggers engineers. These were not passive pools. They were the central batteries of a vast, gravity-fed network of canals, moats, and channels that redistributed water across hundreds of square miles. Recent research led by archaeologist Dr. Damian Evans using that LIDAR data has shown Angkor not as a dense urban core, but as a low-density, sprawling metropolis. Its suburbs were laid out in a vast grid pattern defined by these water channels, turning the entire region into a managed watershed. This system served a brilliantly practical purpose. It captured the deluge of the wet season, preventing catastrophic floods, and then metered that life-giving resource out during the long, parching dry season to support intensive rice agriculture. This hydraulic abundance fed a population that may have exceeded 1 million, fueling the empire's military and cultural might. Yet to view the barrays only as sophisticated tanks is to miss their soul. In Khmer cosmology, these reservoirs were sacred symbols. They represented the mythical sea of milk from Hindu tradition, the primordial ocean from which all creation arose. The central temple, Angkor Wat, was its Mount Meru, the axis of the universe. The moats surrounding temples were not just defensive, they were cosmological boundaries. This fusion was complete. The practical engine of the empire was also its most powerful spiritual metaphor. Water management was statecraft, and statecraft was a divine duty of the god-king. The system's immense scale, however, may have contained the seeds of its own vulnerability. Maintaining such an extensive network of canals and embankments against the relentless pressure of tropical rains and silt required constant, organized labor. Some researchers, including Dr. Evans, suggest that shifts in climate toward more unstable monsoon patterns in the 14th century placed this intricate system under unbearable stress. A series of severe droughts followed by intense floods could have overwhelmed the channels, damaged the earthworks, and crippled the rice production that fed the populous capital. The very complexity that empowered the empire could have made it fragile. When the hydrological balance was lost, the social and spiritual contract embodied in those vast barrays may have fractured as well. This leads us to a pivotal and haunting reflection, one that connects the dots from Mesopotamia to Angkor. Can a civilization become a prisoner of its own hydrological genius? Can the very system designed to guarantee survival become so large, so integral to identity and power, that its failure triggers a cascade of collapse? Angkor's hidden hydrology stands as a breathtaking testament to human ambition, a Baroque symphony in earth and water. It shows us that the greatest ancient achievements were often those that seamlessly willed ideology into the landscape itself. But its gradual transformation also whispers a warning about the perils of scale and the delicate equilibrium between controlling an environment and becoming irrevocably dependent upon that control. This global journey reveals a pattern not just of pipes and canals, but of a fundamental human dialogue with a restless, essential element. A stone wall no higher than your knee traces a curve across a dry wash. To the untrained eye, it is just a scatter of rocks, but in the blistering canyonlands of the American Southwest, this modest line was a lifeline. The ancestral Puebloans, sometimes called the Anasazi, mastered a philosophy of water engineering that stood in stark contrast to the aqueducts and reservoirs of empires. Their genius was not in conquering the landscape, but in listening to it, in crafting 1,000 subtle conversations with the desert itself. Where rainfall was measured in whispers, not downpours, they became experts in capturing every single drop. They built low-check dams across seasonal arroyos, not to hold back floods, but to slow the fleeting rush of stormwater, allowing it to seep into the soil and nourish the roots of crops planted just downstream. They carved terraces into hillsides to create flat planting surfaces that caught runoff, and they constructed grid gardens, small plots bordered by stones that retained precious moisture and warmth overnight. The hidden engineering here was one of alignment and observation, a deep reading of the microenvironment. A terrace was placed not at random, but exactly where centuries of flash floods had deposited the finest silt. A check dam was oriented to guide water toward a specific field. This was hydrology on a human scale, a partnership with the land's own logic. Archaeological research reveals how intimately their lives were woven into the hydrology. Settlements were strategically perched near seeps or at the bases of cliffs where groundwater would naturally emerge. Their very architecture, from the positioning of their cliff dwellings to the layout of their pit houses, often considered solar orientation and water drainage. Studies of tree rings and settlement patterns show their practices were not static. As climate patterns shifted over centuries, bringing periods of prolonged drought, their strategies evolved. They would adjust their agricultural methods, sometimes focusing more on drought-resistant crops, and in some cases, they made the difficult decision to migrate from an area when the water could no longer support the community. This adaptability was their resilience. It prompts a powerful question for our own time of climatic uncertainty. In an era obsessed with large-scale, high-tech solutions, what profound lessons does this ancient, low-tech wisdom hold? The ancestral Puebloans did not seek to control the desert, but to cooperate with its rhythms. Their legacy is a testament to sustainability through meticulous observation and graceful integration, a hidden wisdom still written in the silent alignment of stones along a dry creek bed. It suggests that sometimes the most advanced system is not the most monumental but the most attuned. A satellite does not see a forest, it sees a ghost. Orbiting high above the Earth, its synthetic aperture radar pierces through dense jungle canopy, sending down microwaves that bounce not off leaves, but off the subtle contours of the ground below. The returning signal paints a picture of what lies hidden, revealing the faint grid of a long-lost canal or the geometric footprint of a reservoir swallowed by time. This is the new frontier of discovery, where our investigation shifts from the trowel to the terminal, employing a suite of technologies that act like X-ray vision for the planet. We are no longer just digging for clues, we are scanning the very skin of the Earth to reconstruct its ancient circulatory systems. The toolkit is as diverse as the landscapes it probes. LIDAR, or light detection and ranging, has been a game changer. Mounted on planes or drones, it fires millions of laser pulses at the ground. By measuring how long each pulse takes to return, it builds an exquisitely detailed, three-dimensional map of the surface, digitally stripping away vegetation to show every mound, ditch, and terrace. It was LIDAR that unveiled the true, sprawling scale of Angkor, transforming it from a collection of temples into a vast, engineered metropolis. On a smaller, more precise scale, ground-penetrating radar is used. Dragged across a field, it sends radio waves into the earth, creating a sonogram of the subsurface, revealing the outline of a buried Qanat channel or the foundation of a Roman settling tank without ever lifting a shovel. Other tools read the chemical whispers left behind by water itself. Scientists take core samples from lake beds or ancient reservoir sediments. Within those layers of mud, they conduct isotopic analysis, examining the chemical fingerprints of oxygen and hydrogen atoms. These signatures can tell a story of changing precipitation patterns over centuries, correlating periods of drought with the abandonment of a city, or revealing where ancient farmers diverted a spring. Even thermal imaging plays a role. Drones flying at dawn can detect minute differences in soil temperature. Stone that once lined a canal retains coolness differently than the surrounding earth, tracing a phantom line across a modern farmer's field. Remote sensing specialists like Dr. Sarah Parkak, who uses satellite imagery to find archaeological sites, often describe this as a revolution in perspective. We are moving from studying isolated points, a single well or a stretch of aqueduct, to seeing entire integrated systems. We can now map a complete ancient watershed from the mountain catchment areas, through the diversion channels and reservoirs, all the way to the agricultural fields and urban centers. This holistic view is transformative. It shows us that these were not standalone projects, but deeply interconnected networks, ecological masterpieces where a change in one area, like deforestation upstream, could have cascading effects on the water supply for a city dozens of miles away. The reflective angle here is profound. These technologies are more than just fancy gadgets, they are temporal bridges. They allow us to see the landscape as the ancient engineer saw it, to understand the comprehensive logic behind their choices. We are reconstructing not just static ruins but dynamic processes, the very pulse of water through a civilization. This changes our fundamental understanding of scale and intelligence. What we once might have dismissed as a simple farming terrace is now revealed as one node in a vast, intelligent design for survival. These tools grant us a form of time travel, letting us witness the flow of ancient life by reading the indelible marks it left on the earth itself, a hidden text we are only now learning to decipher. The true test of an aqueduct was not the arch but the seal. For all their grand designs, ancient engineers faced a relentless enemy, water's quiet power to seep, erode, and dissolve. Their lasting victories were won not with geometry alone, but with chemistry, in the hidden alchemy of their materials. The substances they mixed, quarried, and fired were the unsung heroes of hydraulic history, the reason why some channels still hold their shape after 2,000 years. Consider the Roman concrete that lined their aqueduct tunnels. Its secret was a volcanic ash called pozzolana, mined from the hills around Pozzuoli. When mixed with lime and rubble, this ash triggered a chemical reaction that allowed the concrete to cure and harden even when submerged, forming a rock-like waterproof bond. This was a material that embraced water, using it to become stronger. The recipe was so effective that it was lost after the empire's fall, and modern scientists spent centuries trying to replicate its durability. Similarly, in the jungles of Mesoamerica and Southeast Asia, engineers devised their own impervious seals. The Maya and Khmer created sophisticated lime plasters, often mixing in plant saps or volcanic ash to reduce cracking and permeability. They would coat the interiors of reservoirs and canals with these plasters, creating a smooth, waterproof membrane that kept their vital stores from leaking back into the thirsty earth. This was not haphazard daubing, it was applied science, born from generations of observing what mixtures held fast against the rains. The choice of materials often reflected a deep understanding of local geology and a principle of sustainability. While the Romans famously used lead pipes for some urban distribution, a choice we now know carried health consequences, many other cultures favored ceramic. From the Indus Valley to Persia, baked clay pipes and linings were the standard, inert, durable, and crafted from the most abundant of resources. The lining of a Qanat channel might simply be the hardened native clay of the tunnel wall itself, chosen because its fine particles swelled when wet, creating a natural seal. This investigation into ancient materials reveals a pattern of long-term experimentation. These formulations were not invented in a laboratory, but through centuries of trial and error passed down as craft knowledge. A modern materials scientist might analyze a sample of Roman mortar and identify the precise crystalline structure that gives it strength. An archaeologist might find a Khmer plaster mix that includes specific organic residues, hinting at a recipe perfected to handle tropical expansion and contraction. These substances are silent witnesses to practical genius, each mix a solution to a very specific environmental challenge. This leads us to a reflective comparison about our own approach. Ancient builders overwhelmingly used local, natural materials: stone, clay, lime, volcanic ash. Their supply chain was the landscape itself. The energy required was human and animal labor, focused on transformation rather than extraction and long-distance transport. Today, our most common water infrastructure materials like PVC plastic or Portland cement are highly processed and energy-intensive to produce. This is not a judgment, but an observation that prompts a question about permanence and footprint. The ancient approach created systems that, when maintained, could function for millennia with a relatively light touch on the planet. Our modern materials offer incredible efficiency and scale, but often with a different kind of environmental cost and a lifespan measured in decades, not centuries. The lesson here is not that we should abandon modern chemistry, but that we might reconsider the wisdom of designing with locality and longevity in mind. What if our infrastructure was meant to last as long as an aqueduct, built from materials that work with their environment rather than merely resisting it? The silent chemistry in their stone and mortar challenges us to think not just about how we move water, but what we choose to build that journey from, and what legacy those materials will leave when the last pump has fallen silent. The silent geometry of water demanded a hidden language of numbers. Before a single stone was laid for an aqueduct or a trench dug for a Qanat, ancient engineers solved complex equations in their minds, working with principles of slope, volume, and pressure that modern physics would later formalize. Their tools were breathtakingly simple. A Roman surveyor and agrimensor might use a chorobates, a long wooden bench with a carefully leveled groove filled with water. By sighting along this liquid horizon, he could establish a perfectly flat line across a rolling landscape. To measure the vital downward slope or gradient, he used a dioptra, a precursor to the theodolite, which could measure angles with remarkable precision. The goal was astonishingly fine: to keep water moving gently but surely, preventing stagnant pools or destructive torrents. A Roman aqueduct typically dropped only between 1 and 3 feet for every 1,000 feet of length. Over dozens of miles, maintaining that minuscule, consistent descent was a monumental feat of calculation and patience. A single miscalculation meant the water would either stall or gain enough speed to scour the channel walls, leading to catastrophic erosion and collapse. This was mathematics made manifest in stone. In Persia, the Qanat digger faced a similar intellectual challenge, but from the opposite direction. Starting at the mother well in the foothills, he had to calculate a reverse slope, tunneling upward at just enough of an incline that the water, seeking its own level, would follow. The tools were even more rudimentary, often a plumb line and a series of sighting rods. If the slope was too steep, the tunnel would exit the water table too soon. If too shallow, the diggers would flood their own work. Success relied on an empirical, generationally refined understanding of local geology and hydrology. They managed water speed intuitively, knowing that a wider, smoother channel would slow the flow, while a narrower one would accelerate it. They even understood basic principles of siphonage, using inverted clay pipes to carry water across shallow valleys, a technique that required managing air pressure to prevent blockages. The knowledge transmission behind these feats is a profound mystery of its own. There were no formal engineering schools or printed manuals for most of these civilizations. Instead, expertise flowed through apprenticeships, through guilds and families where sons learned from fathers, and masters guided novices on the worksite. The textbook was the project itself, the calculations passed down as oral law and practical demonstration. A Roman Aquarius or waterman learned the feel of a proper flow, the sound of water in a healthy channel, the look of sediment that indicated a problem. This was a living, embodied mathematics. It prompts us to reconsider what we mean by advanced knowledge. Their understanding was not expressed in algebraic formulas, but in structures that stood for millennia. It was a geometry of survival, written in the enduring line of an aqueduct arching toward a distant city, or in the cool, perpetual flow from a Qanat mouth in the desert. This hidden computational layer reveals that their greatest resource was not just water, but human ingenuity, the quiet, persistent application of observation and reason to the most fundamental of challenges. It was a dialogue between mind and material, where every calculation was ultimately tested by the relentless, truthful physics of a flowing stream. A channel carved in stone is only as reliable as the society that guards it. The true hidden engineering of these ancient water systems was not merely hydrological, it was profoundly human. Behind every mile of aqueduct and every subterranean tunnel lay a vast, often invisible, social engine of organization, labor, and relentless maintenance. This machinery determined whether a system would flourish for centuries or crumble within a generation. Consider the sheer scale of mobilization. To build the West Barre at Angkor, Khmer rulers marshaled a staggering corvée labor force, a form of tax paid not in grain or coin, but in muscle and time. Thousands of villagers, likely working in rotating shifts dictated by the agricultural calendar, would have moved millions of cubic meters of earth using baskets and sheer determination. In Persia, the specialized knowledge of digging and maintaining a Qanat was guarded by guilds, families who passed down the precise arts of surveying and tunneling from father to son. This was not just a job, it was a sacred, hereditary trust. The Roman approach scaled this organization to a bureaucratic science. The water commissioner, the curator aquarum, was a high-ranking official, a senator like Frontinus, who oversaw a permanent staff of architects, surveyors, and a small army of enslaved and paid workers. This corps was responsible for the aqueduct's daily operation, from clearing blockages to patching leaks. The system's survival depended on this hierarchy, a clear chain of command managing a critical public resource. Financing these endeavors required immense wealth and clever economics. Projects were often funded directly from the royal or imperial treasury, a direct investment in political stability and economic power. In other cases, it was a communal duty. The intricate terrace systems of the ancestral Puebloans or the neighborhood drainage of the Indus Valley speak to a different model, one of shared responsibility without a central overlord. Here, maintenance was woven into the fabric of daily life, a collective understanding that the community's survival depended on each person's contribution. This reveals the core challenge. Construction was a monumental but finite effort. The real test was the unending work of upkeep. Silt had to be dredged from canals season after season. Qanat shafts required constant clearing of wind-blown sand. Aqueduct channels needed regular inspection and repair. When this social contract of maintenance broke down, the physical system was doomed. A change in climate, a shift in political priorities, or a social upheaval could scatter the specialized labor force or drain the treasury needed for repairs. The channels would then silt up, the tunnels collapse, and the water would find other paths. This is where the hidden engineering becomes a mirror for society itself. The organization of water management often rigidly reflected and reinforced social hierarchies. The Roman system, for all its public benefits, was built and maintained in part by enslaved labor, a stark division between those who designed the luxury and those who dug its foundations. The Khmer god king's absolute power was made manifest through his ability to command the labor that reshaped the earth. Yet, the communal models show a different possibility, one of flatter, more cooperative social structures. So we are left with a pivotal reflection for our own era of aging dams and brittle pipelines. Our greatest infrastructure challenge today is not primarily one of design, but of sustained political will and investment in maintenance. The ancient world teaches us that a water system is not a static monument, but a living process. Its longevity depends less on the strength of its mortar and more on the strength of the societal agreement to care for it, generation after generation. The most resilient engineering, it seems, is often etched not in stone, but in the unwritten contract between people. The dialogue with water was always a conversation with the entire living world. Ancient engineers were not simply imposing their will upon a passive landscape. They were engaging in a dynamic, reciprocal relationship with their ecosystems, a form of early geoengineering whose consequences unfolded over centuries. Some interventions created cascades of unintended harm, while others fostered remarkable resilience, and the difference often lay in how deeply they understood the web of life they were altering. Take the iconic terraces of the Andes, sculpted into mountainsides like giant staircases. These were far more than flat spaces for potatoes and maize. By slowing runoff, they prevented catastrophic soil erosion on steep slopes. They created a series of microclimates, with warmer conditions on the lower terraces and cooler ones higher up, allowing farmers to cultivate a diverse range of crops at different altitudes. This was biodiversity engineering, a system that worked with gravity and temperature gradients to strengthen the entire agricultural system against the failure of any single crop. Similarly, in the Valley of Mexico, the Aztec Chinampas, often called floating gardens, were a masterpiece of ecological integration. These were not floating at all, but artificial islands built by weaving together lakebed reeds and mud anchored by willow trees. The canals between them served as transportation routes, but also as aquatic farms teeming with fish and waterfowl. The nutrient-rich muck dredged from these canals was piled onto the Chinampas as fertilizer, creating a closed-loop system. The willows stabilized the banks and provided habitat, while the entire network acted as a water filtration system. This was a managed wetland ecosystem that produced food, supported wildlife, and purified water, all within a human-made framework. It was a symbiotic relationship with the lake, not a conquest of it. Environmental archaeologists study these long-term relationships by reading the soil itself. They analyze pollen records to see how plant life changed, or examine sediment cores for evidence of erosion or chemical change. This research reveals the full spectrum of outcomes. We have already seen the tragic irony of Mesopotamia, where irrigation canals brought life, but also a slow, silent poison of salt that degraded the farmland over generations. This was a system that solved the delivery equation brilliantly, but failed to account for the chemistry of removal. Contrast this with the Persian Qanat. Its ecological footprint was remarkably light. By tapping only the renewable portion of an aquifer and delivering water without evaporation, it created sustainable oases that could persist for millennia without depleting the source. It did not dramatically alter the surface landscape or the chemistry of the soil. It simply revealed a hidden resource with minimal disturbance. These comparisons force us to consider a profound reflective question. How did these civilizations perceive their own role within the natural world? For the Aztecs, the Chinampa may have been seen as an extension of the lake's own generative power. For the Mesopotamian king, the canal might have been a symbol of dominance over chaotic floods. Their perceptions shaped their design, and their design, in turn, wrote a lasting verdict in the land. This frames their work as the earliest large-scale experiments in shaping our planet. Their successes and failures are case studies written in sediment and salt, in thriving wetlands and abandoned fields. They teach us that sustainable design is not just about the efficient movement of water, but about anticipating the long-term conversation between our engineering and the intricate, living systems it touches. It asks us whether our own modern interventions are more like the Chinampa, designed to integrate and enrich, or like the early canal, solving one problem while quietly sowing the seeds of another. The reservoir was a mirror for the heavens. In ancient civilizations, the flow of water was choreographed to tell a story far greater than irrigation or sanitation. It was a physical script for cosmic order, a liquid architecture of belief and authority. When a Maya king stood before the sacred pool at the base of a temple, he was not just looking at a water source. He was gazing into a portal to the underworld, a reflective surface where rituals could commune with the gods of rain and fertility. The water's presence, its clarity, its very level, were direct measures of his divine covenant with the people. This was symbolic engineering, where every canal's curve and fountain spray was imbued with intention, designed to manifest ideology in a form everyone could see and feel. Anthropologists like Dr. Wendy Ashmore have shown how the Maya built their cities as cosmological maps. The placement of reservoirs and canals was often aligned with celestial events or sacred geography, turning the entire hydraulic system into a model of the universe. Water did not just support life, it enacted myth. This pattern repeats across the world. In the meticulously clean cities of the Indus Valley, the advanced drainage and great bath structures suggest more than hygiene. Scholars propose these were spaces for ritual purification, where the act of managing water, keeping it separate, channeling it precisely, reinforced a social ideal of order and spiritual cleanliness. The engineering served a civic theology. Perhaps no one wielded water's symbolism more overtly than the Romans. The spectacular public fountains, or nymphea, were not merely decorative. They were roaring declarations of imperial power and beneficence. The aqueduct was the proof, the fountain was the performance. Here, in the heart of the city, water that had journeyed dozens of miles burst forth in a lavish, wasteful display. It communicated a clear message. Rome had tamed nature itself and brought its bounty to the people, a gift from the emperor and the gods who favored him. Controlling the display was as critical as controlling the supply. The water's journey from wild mountain spring to disciplined urban jet was a parable of civilization. This fusion reached its zenith in places like Angkor. The vast barrays were engineered as terrestrial oceans, reflecting the Temple Mountains at their center. The alignment was precise, a deliberate mirroring of the Hindu myth of the sea of milk churned by gods to create the universe. The king, by commissioning this hydraulic cosmos, positioned himself as the divine axis around which all order revolved. The system's function to store water was inseparable from its function to legitimize his rule. Expert analysis consistently reveals this dual purpose. The technology was never neutral, it was always in conversation with power and belief. This invites a quiet, reflective question for our modern world. In our largely utilitarian relationship with water, where it arrives through anonymous pipes and vanishes down unseen drains, what profound connections have we lost? We have mastered delivery and disposal with incredible efficiency, but we have largely severed the symbolic thread. Water is a commodity, a utility bill, a resource to be managed. The ancient holistic view, where a reservoir was also a temple and a canal a sacred path, integrated the physical and the spiritual. It acknowledged water's role not just in sustaining the body, but in nourishing a community's identity and its place in the cosmos. Their engineering served the spirit as well as the stomach, reminding us that the most enduring systems often flow from a deeper source than mere necessity. The resilience of a water system is measured not in its years of operation, but in the moment it breaks. A silent clock ticks within every aqueduct and reservoir, one calibrated to the delicate balance between human ambition and environmental reality. To truly grasp the genius of these ancient engineers, we must also stand in the ruins of their greatest failures, conducting a kind of forensic hydrology. What can the silted canals of Mesopotamia or the cracked beds of an Angkorian reservoir teach us about the anatomy of collapse? The answer is rarely a single catastrophe, but a slow unraveling where environmental stress exposes deep societal fault lines. Paleoclimatologists, scientists who read the Earth's ancient diary, provide the crucial timeline. By analyzing the width of tree rings from long-buried timbers or the chemical signatures trapped in ice cores and lake sediments, they can reconstruct precise climate histories. Their work reveals that the classic Maya collapse coincided with a series of intense, multi-year droughts. Similarly, sediment cores from the West Barre at Angkor show periods of extreme monsoon variability, violent floods followed by prolonged dry spells in the centuries leading up to the capital's gradual transformation. Climate change was the trigger, but it was not the sole cause. It acted as a multiplier of existing pressures. In Mesopotamia, the slow poisoning of the soil by irrigation salts was a creeping technological failure centuries in the making. When a period of drier conditions arrived, the already weakened agricultural system had no buffer left. The land could no longer feed the population it had once sustained, placing unbearable strain on the social order. The political and religious institutions built around water management then faced a crisis of legitimacy. For the Maya king, a drought was not just a weather event, it was a divine abandonment. When rituals and sacrifices failed to bring rain, the very foundation of royal power dissolved. In Rome, the highly centralized bureaucracy that maintained the aqueducts depended on a stable, wealthy state. As the empire fragmented and resources were diverted to endless military campaigns, the legion of engineers and laborers needed to clean channels and repair arches simply dissipated. The physical system decayed because the social system that sustained it had already faltered. This is the core insight from failure analysis. Collapse is a systems problem. It occurs at the intersection of environmental shock and social vulnerability. A perfectly engineered canal is useless if the cooperative agreement to dredge it falls apart. A reservoir designed for a stable climate becomes a liability when that climate becomes erratic. The ancient world presents a sobering catalogue of these interacting failures, where overexploitation of a resource, like deforestation upstream causing erosion that silted up downstream canals, compounded the effects of political short-sightedness. This forensic look backward forces an urgent, reflective question onto our own era. What silent clocks are ticking within our vast, modern water infrastructure? We have built colossal dams, aquifer pumping networks, and continent-spanning pipelines, systems of a scale the ancients could scarcely imagine. But have we designed out the vulnerabilities they discovered? Are we, like the Mesopotamians, solving for delivery while ignoring long-term consequences like aquifer depletion or soil degradation? Are our institutions, like those of the later Roman Empire, becoming too fragmented or short-sighted to fund the relentless, unglamorous work of maintenance? Studying these ancient failures is not an exercise in assigning blame, but in mapping the pathways to resilience. It teaches us that the strongest system is not necessarily the biggest or most technologically advanced, but the one most adaptable to change, both environmental and social. It is the system that has a plan for when the rains stop, and a society still willing to carry out that plan. The ghost of a failed reservoir asks us what we are building for, not just for the next decade, but for the next drought that history assures us is always coming. A stepped well in Rajasthan descends into the earth like an inverted temple, its symmetrical staircases leading down to a shimmering pool. Half a world away, in the highlands of Peru, a similar pattern of stone terraces carves a mountainside into a giant staircase for crops. These structures share no architect, no common blueprint, and likely no direct line of communication. Yet they exist, echoing each other across oceans and centuries. This is the profound puzzle of parallel innovation. How do we explain the startlingly similar solutions that emerged in cultures that were, by all historical accounts, completely isolated from one another? Was it a case of shared human genius responding to universal challenges, or could there have been whispers of knowledge traveling further than we ever suspected? The evidence invites us to look at the ancient world through a comparative lens, searching for hidden threads of connection in stone and water. Consider the phenomenon of the stepwell or baoli in the arid regions of India. These were not simple pits, but elaborate multi-story structures carved into the ground, with ornate columns and shaded landings surrounding a deep water source. Their primary function was practical, to provide reliable access to a receding water table during the long dry season. But they also served as cool community centers, places of ritual and architectural marvels. Now look at the grand staircases or ghats that line the sacred rivers of India. While different in form and function, both systems revolve around the architectural mediation of water access, creating a ceremonial descent toward a life-giving source. Did the concept of the stepped water structure arise in one place and spread, or was it reinvented independently wherever a civilization faced the dual challenge of seasonal water scarcity and a need for communal gathering space? This pattern of independent invention becomes even more striking when we examine terrace farming. In the Andes, the Inca and their predecessors sculpted entire mountains into a series of flat, walled fields to prevent erosion and capture moisture. In the Philippines, the Ifugao people created the breathtaking Banor rice terraces, often called the stairway to heaven, using a remarkably similar technique to farm steep slopes. Both systems solved identical problems of gravity, soil retention, and water distribution on difficult terrain. They are masterpieces of landscape engineering, yet they were born worlds apart. This strongly suggests a process of convergent evolution in human technology. When faced with the universal laws of physics and the common need to feed a population, brilliant minds in different corners of the globe can arrive at eerily similar conclusions. The same question surrounds early irrigation. In ancient Egypt, the shaduf, a simple counterweighted lever, was used to lift water from the Nile into canals. In China, during the Shang and Zhou dynasties, similar lever-based devices and extensive canal networks were developed to manage the floods of the Yellow River. Both civilizations, dependent on great, unpredictable rivers for survival, developed bureaucracies to coordinate large-scale water management. The parallels are undeniable. So, which theory holds more weight, diffusion or independent invention? Global historians and archaeologists often see a spectrum. For some technologies, like basic terracing or lever-based irrigation, independent invention is the most logical explanation. The principles are simple enough to be discovered multiple times. The human mind, observing water flow downhill or a log acting as a lever, can innovate in parallel. However, the diffusion theory cannot be entirely dismissed, especially when we consider the vast, interconnected networks of trade like the Silk Road. While we have no record of an Indian engineer traveling to Peru with blueprints for a stepwell, ideas are subtle travelers. A merchant might describe a clever water-lifting device he saw in one kingdom to a farmer in another. A traveling artisan could sketch a novel canal gate. This slow, informal exchange of concepts, what some scholars call stimulus diffusion, could plant a seed that then grows into a locally adapted solution. The shared concept of the Qanat, for instance, appears not only in Persia but in similar forms in North Africa and even Western China, regions linked by trade routes. This suggests the core idea may have diffused, while each culture engineered its own specific application. The most compelling conclusion is likely a blend of both. Human ingenuity possesses a powerful toolkit of logical problem solving. When presented with a challenge like aridity or flooding, different cultures will experiment and often converge on efficient solutions, a testament to our shared cognitive wiring. Yet the ancient world was far more connected than we sometimes assume. Trade caravans, diplomatic missions, and migrating groups carried more than spices and silk. They carried stories and ideas. A whispered description of a Roman aqueduct might inspire a local ruler to attempt something grand with his own resources. The truth is, we may never be able to fully disentangle the threads of independent genius from those of subtle, undocumented inspiration. But that mystery is itself the point. This comparative study reveals a hidden unity in the human story. It highlights a shared reservoir of intellect and resilience. From the deserts of India to the mountains of the Andes, our ancestors looked upon the same elemental challenges, and with minds separated by continents but linked by common need, they often built remarkably similar bridges between survival and abundance. This unseen kinship in innovation suggests that the most profound connections in history may not be written in treaties or battles, but in the quiet, enduring logic of a terraced field or a descending staircase, leading us all toward the same essential source. The blueprint for a civilization's survival was often not etched in stone, but in memory. Behind every enduring aqueduct and every precisely sloped Qanat tunnel lay a living curriculum, a hidden system for passing irreplaceable knowledge from one generation to the next. This transmission was the true lifeline of ancient engineering, a fragile yet resilient codex written in song, story, and the practiced hands of a master. To understand how these systems were built, we must listen for the classroom that had no walls. In the flickering light at the mouth of a Qanat shaft, the lesson began not with a textbook, but with a rhythm. Master diggers, known as mukanis, guided their apprentices through chants and songs that encoded critical information. The melodies held the proper sequences for digging, the warning signs of a collapsing tunnel, or the formulas for calculating a slope. This was knowledge made portable and durable, transformed into an oral tradition that could survive the darkness of the dig. The apprentice learned by doing, by feeling the consistency of the clay, by listening to the sound of a pick against wet rock, by developing an intuitive sense for when the air turned stale. The engineering resided in muscle memory and a seasoned eye, a kind of embodied wisdom that no parchment could fully capture. Other civilizations formalized this knowledge into written guides. The Roman engineer Vitruvius compiled his 10-volume work, De Architectura, in the 1st century BCE. It served as a comprehensive manual, covering everything from the selection of materials for aqueducts to the principles of town planning and water supply. He wrote not just for fellow experts, but to preserve technical knowledge for the state. Similarly, in Mesopotamia, cuneiform tablets meticulously recorded irrigation schedules, water allotments for different fields, and the responsibilities for canal maintenance. These were bureaucratic documents, the administrative backbone that kept the hydraulic system functioning across generations of farmers and officials. They represent an early shift from purely experiential knowledge to documented, reproducible procedure. Yet for every Vitruvius, there were countless unnamed masters whose expertise never left the workshop. The brickmaker who knew the exact mix of straw and clay to withstand constant moisture, the plasterer who understood how to seal a reservoir with local lime and ash, the surveyor who could set a perfect grade using only shadows and sticks. Their genius was often tacit. It was transferred through years of side-by-side labor, through correction and demonstration, through the slow accumulation of a craft's unwritten rules. Historians of technology note this created a dual stream of knowledge. One was explicit, recorded in manuals and tablets. The other was implicit, a vast reservoir of practical skill and adaptive problem-solving that lived only in the community of practitioners. This reliance on person-to-person transmission made the knowledge ecosystem breathtakingly powerful, yet profoundly vulnerable. When a culture faced disruption, whether through conquest, migration, or a breakdown in social order, that living chain could be severed. The songs would fall silent, the masters would pass without apprentices, and the nuanced understanding of how to maintain a specific canal or clear a particular type of silt would evaporate. Languages have gone extinct, and with them, the precise terminology for tools, techniques, and geological features. we are left with the physical shell of their engineering: the arch, the tunnel, the terrace, but often without the operating manual written in the minds of its builders. This leads us to a quiet, haunting reflection. What immense volumes of practical wisdom have been permanently lost? Not just the grand theories, but the 10,000 tiny corrections, the local fixes, the folk understandings of hydrology that allowed a community to thrive in its unique niche. The extinction of a culture or a craft guild meant the loss of a unique dialogue with a specific landscape. Our modern world, with its digital archives and global databases, might assume knowledge is now permanent. But the ancient experience whispers a caution. It reminds us that the most critical infrastructure is not the channel itself, but the living tradition that keeps the water flowing within it. The true engineering masterpiece was the curriculum, passed hand to hand and voice to voice, ensuring that the conversation with the river never had to end. A village in the Omani Desert remembers a song its grandfathers stopped singing. The melody was a map, its rhythm guiding diggers through the dark to maintain the Falaj, the local name for a Qanat. For decades, the song faded as modern pumps drilled deep into ancient aquifers, pulling water faster than the rains could replenish. The tunnels silted up, the gardens withered, and a centuries-old dialogue with the hidden water was severed. But now, a new kind of dig has begun. This is Reconstruction in action, a living case study where ancient blueprints are being pulled from the archives of the earth itself to answer a desperate modern question. The project begins not with heavy machinery, but with listening. Teams of hydrologists and archaeologists partner with the village elders, whose childhood memories hold the first clues. They walk the dry riverbeds together, pointing to faint depressions in the earth where vertical shafts once descended. The elders recount stories of where the sweetest water flowed and where a tunnel collapsed in their father's time. This oral history is the initial survey, layering human memory over the blank slate of the desert. Then, technology joins the conversation. Ground-penetrating radar scans the suspected path, revealing ghostly outlines of the buried channel. Drones map the line of shafts from above, creating a digital model of the forgotten network. The collaboration is vital, the engineers providing the tools to see beneath the sand, the community providing the lived experience to interpret what they find. The real work, however, is profoundly physical and communal. Teams descend into the first cleared shaft, their headlamps cutting through a century of darkness. The air is thick and still. They find the tunnel mouth choked with a solidified mix of sand, roots, and collapsed masonry. Clearing it is a meticulous, dangerous process, done largely by hand to avoid damaging the original structure. Buckets of debris are hauled up the shafts on ropes, a rhythmic labor that echoes the work of the original Mukanis. The challenges are constant. A section of tunnel may be unstable, requiring careful shoring with new bricks that match the old. They might discover that the water table has indeed fallen, meaning the mother well must be carefully deepened, a delicate operation to reconnect with the aquifer without causing a collapse. Each day is a negotiation between respecting the ancient design and applying modern safety and materials science. Parallel to the physical restoration is the social reactivation. Project leaders like Dr. Ali Al-Hinai, who has worked on Falaj revivals in Oman, emphasize this is not just an engineering fix. The water rights and distribution schedules, once governed by a sundial and a village water master, must be reinterpreted for a new era. Workshops are held under the date palms, bringing together families to discuss how the revived flow will be shared. The consensus is often to blend the old with the new. The Qanat's gentle, constant flow is perfectly suited for a modern drip irrigation system, delivering water directly to the roots of crops with minimal waste. This hybrid model maximizes every drop, allowing the community to grow food with a fraction of the water required by the old flood irrigation or the thirsty pumps. The moment the water returns is not marked by a roar, but by a whisper. After months of labor, the diggers at the outlet tunnel feel a coolness in the air, then see a trickle of mud, then finally, a clear, steady stream emerging into the sunlight. It is a resurrection. The village garden, long parched, begins to green again. The project leader might reflect that the greatest triumph was not technological, but social. We did not just restore a water channel, we restored a community's agency over its most vital resource, one elder remarked. The revived phallage becomes more than a water source. It is a symbol of continuity and resilience, proving that the ancient wisdom was not obsolete, but simply waiting to be remembered. This case study forces a powerful reflection upon our global moment. In a world where water stress is escalating and energy-intensive desalination plants are often the default solution, can these ancient, gravity-fed, low-tech systems provide a viable piece of the puzzle? The answer from the Omani Desert is a cautious but hopeful yes. They are not a panacea, but a proven model of sustainable extraction and community-based management. Their revival demonstrates that reconstruction is far from an academic exercise. It is a tangible process of renewal, a literal reconnection to a source of life and a way of living that understood the limits of the earth. It asks us to look at our own landscapes not just for what we can extract, but for what hidden harmonies we might restore. The ghost of a water system can be resurrected in pure light. Inside powerful computers, entire ancient watersheds are being rebuilt as intricate digital twins, virtual models fed by every scrap of data we possess. Here, the long silent canals of Angkor can flow once more. Researchers can program a virtual monsoon, unleashing a torrent of pixelated rain onto the digital landscape, and watch in real time as the water pools in the barrays, snakes through the reconstructed channels, and spills across the simulated rice fields. This is not a video game, it is a rigorous laboratory for the past. Computational archaeologists like Dr. Tom Garrison, who models Maya reservoirs, begin by importing the precise landscape data from LIDAR scans. They layer in archaeological findings, the dimensions of a canal here, the slope of a terrace there. Then they feed the model paleoclimate data, the best estimates of ancient rainfall and temperature. The result is a dynamic, testable hypothesis of how the entire system functioned as a living organism. The power of this approach lies in experimentation. A theory that once lived only in a journal article can now be put to the test. What if a decade-long drought struck the digital Angkor? The model can calculate how quickly the reservoirs would drain under the strain of 1 million inhabitants. What if a key canal was blocked by silt as maintenance declined? The simulation can show the cascading failures across the network, flooding some areas while parching others. These digital twins allow scientists to probe failure points and system capacities in ways that physical excavation, which reveals a single moment in time, simply cannot. They transform static ruins into interactive lessons. We can ask the model what if the Khmer had built a diversion channel here, or what if they had prioritized storage in smaller, distributed tanks rather than the colossal barrays. The answers are not definitive history, but they reveal the constraints and possibilities the ancient engineers faced, highlighting the brilliance or the vulnerabilities of their choices with stunning clarity. This virtual frontier fundamentally changes our relationship with these hidden systems. We are no longer just uncovering their bones, we are animating their sinews and observing their pulse. It makes the past a dynamic space for inquiry, a sandbox for understanding resilience. This prompts a profound reflection on our own era. If we can build a digital twin of a 2,000-year-old watershed, what does that mean for managing our own? These models become a bridge across time, suggesting that the most valuable thing we might reconstruct is not the stone conduit itself, but the holistic understanding of how water moves through a community and a landscape. The digital twin does not just show us how it was, it helps us ask with newfound precision why it worked and ultimately why it sometimes failed. A sacred reservoir is more than an archaeological site, it is a living ancestor. To uncover its stones without consulting the community that still holds its stories is not discovery, but a kind of trespass. The process of reconstructing these ancient water systems carries an ethical weight as profound as the engineering itself, a dimension often hidden beneath the technical triumphs. This work unfolds in a delicate space where the past is not a neutral artifact, but a present-day memory, a source of identity, and sometimes a contested resource. The era of parachute archaeology, where outside experts would arrive, excavate, publish, and depart, is increasingly seen as a relic of a colonial mindset. It treated knowledge as a commodity to be extracted, often leaving local communities with little more than a hole in the ground and a disrupted landscape. Today, the field is grappling with a fundamental shift, moving from extraction to partnership. This means that before a single test trench is dug near a revered Maya cenote, or before a restoration team clears a Qanat tunnel on ancestral lands, conversations must begin. These are not mere formalities, but the foundational engineering of ethical practice. Indigenous scholars and community leaders rightfully ask critical questions. Who benefits from this research? Who holds the intellectual property over the traditional ecological knowledge that explains why a terrace was built at a specific angle, or which plants signal a hidden spring? When a 1,000-year-old irrigation technique is revived, who owns the innovation, the distant university, or the village that preserved its memory in folklore? The answers demand new models of collaboration. Projects led by ethical archaeologists now often start with a memorandum of understanding, a formal agreement that outlines data sharing, co-authorship of findings, and training opportunities for local students. The goal is to build capacity, not just extract information. In places like the American Southwest, tribal historic preservation officers are essential partners from the very inception of any study involving ancestral Puebloan water systems. Their guidance ensures that investigation respects spiritual protocols and that findings are repatriated in forms the community can use, perhaps to support land rights or cultural education. This collaborative approach reframes the very purpose of Reconstruction. It is no longer solely about answering academic questions for a global audience, but about serving local needs and strengthening cultural continuity. A restored Qanat becomes a tool for community water sovereignty. A mapped ancient canal system might provide evidence in legal efforts to protect a watershed from modern overuse. The knowledge recovered is stewarded by those to whom it matters most. This leads to the core reflective questions that now shape the field. Who does this reconstructed history truly belong to? If the answer is everyone, then the methods must ensure that everyone, especially descendant communities, has a meaningful voice in its telling. And how can archaeology, a discipline born from a desire to collect and classify, transform into a practice of listening and reciprocal exchange? The ethical dimension is the unseen infrastructure that determines whether our reconstruction of the past heals or harms. It recognizes that the most sophisticated understanding of an ancient sluice gate is incomplete without an understanding of the living people for whom that water still holds meaning. This quiet, patient work of building trust and sharing authority is the crucial engineering that makes any physical reconstruction not just accurate, but truthful and respectful. It ensures that in bringing these hidden systems back to light, we do not overshadow the living cultures that have always known they were there. Projected droughts and floods are not just future scenarios, they are echoes from a past we have only just begun to understand. The maps of our impending crisis overlap eerily with the faded blueprints of ancient civilizations who thrived under similar pressures. This reconstruction is far more than an academic pursuit. It is an urgent act of salvage, retrieving a lost library of climate adaptation strategies written in stone and soil. Water security experts now pore over these archaeological findings not as relics, but as case studies in resilience. They identify transferable design philosophies that transcend their original time and place. The principle of decentralization, embodied in the Persian Qanat, offers a powerful alternative to our vulnerable, centralized grids. A network of small, gravity-fed tunnels is inherently more resilient than a single massive dam. A failure in one section does not collapse the entire system. The Maya mastery of rainwater harvesting, capturing every drop in plastered reservoirs and channeled plazas, provides a model for communities facing increasingly erratic rainfall, turning urban landscapes into their own catchment basins. And the Khmer vision of integrated landscape management, where canals, reservoirs, and fields functioned as a single hydrological organism, points toward a holistic approach we are only now relearning, where water is managed as part of an ecosystem, not as an isolated commodity. The key insight is to extract the philosophy, not to photocopy the blueprint. We are not being asked to rebuild Roman aqueducts, but to embrace their core tenet of long-term, durable infrastructure built for centuries, not decades. We are not meant to abandon modern pumps, but to recognize where a low-energy, sustainable Qanat might better serve a remote community, preserving groundwater for future generations. The past presents a catalogue of tested ideas, a menu of options refined by the harsh filter of survival. This leads to the ultimate, humbling question for our high-tech era. In our rush toward complex, energy-intensive solutions, have we inadvertently blinded ourselves to simpler, more elegant, and ultimately more durable designs perfected long ago? The silent wisdom in those buried channels suggests that our most advanced tool for navigating a water-scarce future might be a willingness to listen to the past. The final blueprint is a painting. While science provides the measurements and the data, it is often the artist's brush or the animator's code that breathes life back into these silent stones, transforming abstract lines on a map into a living, flowing reality we can feel. This artistic interpretation is a vital, parallel form of reconstruction, one that speaks directly to our senses and our emotions, making the invisible not just understood but experienced. Picture a scientific illustrator like the renowned artist and archaeologist Peter Connolly, who spent decades studying the minutiae of Roman military gear and architecture. To reconstruct an aqueduct, he would start with every archaeological report, every surviving sketch by Renaissance artists, every measurement from the ruins. Then, with meticulous cross-hatching and careful watercolor, he would depict the Aqua Claudia not as a broken arch, but as a gleaming, white stucco channel brimming with water, set against a vibrant Campanian sky. The goal is not mere decoration, it is a hypothesis rendered in color and light. The choice to show the water sparkling, to include figures of maintenance workers on a scaffold, to depict the verdant growth fed by the aqueduct's overflow, these are all informed decisions. They answer questions science alone cannot. How did the structure interact with the daily life around it? What was the sensory experience of its presence? This visualization completes the circuit between evidence and empathy. Documentary filmmakers and digital artists take this a step further, employing computer-generated imagery to achieve a kind of virtual time travel. A producer for a major historical series explains the delicate balance. Our first duty is to accuracy. We build our models directly from LIDAR scans and archaeological site plans. But our second duty is to the audience's understanding. We cannot show a static, perfect model. It must feel alive, so we add the shimmer of heat haze on the Roman cobbles, the reflection of a temple in Angkor's Barre, the slow drift of a leaf down a Maya canal. We simulate the play of light at different times of day because that is how people actually saw their world. This process of animation is itself a rigorous form of research. To make water flow correctly through a digital reconstruction of a Persian Qanat, programmers must apply the very laws of fluid dynamics, testing the slope and channel smoothness of the ancient design. The resulting sequence is more than a pretty picture. It is a functional demonstration of the engineering principle in action. When we watch CGI waters surge through the complex sluice gates of a Khmer reservoir, we are not just seeing a guess, we are witnessing a tested simulation of how the system managed the monsoon's power. This creative layer fills the inevitable gaps in the material record with informed speculation, a collaboration between scientist and artist. An archaeologist might know the dimensions of a wooden water wheel used in Han Dynasty China, but the illustrator determines the grain of the timber, the posture of the worker turning it, the spray of water droplets in the air. These details, while not provable, are plausible. They are grounded in the study of period tools, clothing, and biomechanics. This partnership is crucial because it translates a technical report into a human story. We move from knowing that the Nabateans of Petra built dams and canals to feeling the communal relief as the first stormwaters of the season are captured and tamed, ensuring survival in the desert. The artistic interpretation makes the past relatable. It allows us to stand virtually in the shadow of these wonders and grasp their scale, their noise, their sheer impact on the human spirit. This prompts a reflective question about the nature of historical understanding. Does reading a description of the Cloaca Maxima, Rome's Great Sewer, impart the same knowledge as watching a cinematic fly through its dark, vaulted passageways? The data is identical, but the comprehension is different. One engages the intellect, the other immerses the whole self. The artistic reconstruction activates a deeper, more intuitive form of knowing. Ultimately, this visualization is the essential bridge between the academy and the public, between data and wonder. It completes the act of revelation that began with a satellite image or a trowel in the dirt. By making these hidden systems visible and dynamic, art and media perform a final, crucial service. They remind us that these were not sterile feats of engineering, but the vibrant, pulsating infrastructure of lived experience. They restore the context of awe. When we see a painter's depiction of a fountain in a Roman courtyard, or a game environment that lets us virtually maintain a Qanat, we are not just learning about history. We are, for a moment, participating in it. This creative resurrection ensures that the water does not just flow again in models, but in our collective imagination, where the true legacy of these ancient engineers continues to shape our vision of what is possible. The map of the ancient world still holds blank spaces where water once flowed. For all our digital reconstructions and satellite surveys, some of the most fundamental questions remain stubbornly unanswered, driving the next generation of explorers not just to dig, but to think in entirely new ways. One of the grandest mysteries lies beneath the sands of the Sahara. During its green period, when vast lakes and rivers painted the desert, what sophisticated systems might early pastoralists have developed to harness that fleeting abundance? Did they construct ephemeral dams of earth and brush, or chart seasonal wells now buried under dunes? Finding evidence is a monumental challenge, as these soft, organic structures would have left little trace compared to stone aqueducts, yet their discovery could rewrite the story of water management's origins. Similarly, at iconic sites we think we know, enigmatic features defy explanation. At Petra, the Nabateans' entire existence depended on capturing flash floods in a hyper-arid environment. We see their dams and channels, but how exactly did they manage the terrifying, sudden violence of water rushing through the Sick, the narrow gorge leading to the city? The precise mechanics of their control, the moment-to-moment decisions made during a storm, remain a puzzle of ancient risk management. In the highlands of Mexico, the Grand Avenue of the Dead in Teotihuacan aligns with precise celestial points, but some researchers now suggest its gentle slope and subterranean layers might have also served a hydraulic purpose, perhaps as a massive, slow filtration system or a symbolic canal. Was it sacred architecture, brilliant engineering, or a perfect fusion of both? We simply do not yet know. These unanswered questions are the compass points for future discovery. Leading researchers articulate their own pressing puzzles. One archaeologist specializing in the Neolithic wonders aloud, "Can we push the timeline back even further? We see the massive stone circles of Göbekli Tepe, but where is the water infrastructure that supported the gatherings there?" Finding the wells or springs that served humanity's first monumental builders would be a landmark achievement. Another, focused on seafaring cultures like the Minoans of Crete, poses a different challenge. How did an island civilization, surrounded by salt water, secure enough fresh water for its palaces and populous towns? The answer may lie in sophisticated systems for capturing karst spring water and storing it in complex, multi-level systems that we have only begun to map. The tools for answering these questions are evolving as rapidly as the queries themselves. One frontier is sediment genetics. Scientists can now extract ancient DNA from the layers of silt at the bottom of a 2,000-year-old reservoir. This is not the DNA of people, but of the microbial life that lived in that water. Analyzing this genetic soup can reveal shocking details about ancient water quality, indicating the presence of harmful algae or waterborne parasites. It allows researchers to ask, did a shift in the water's biological health, a silent, invisible decline, contribute to a community's hardship or relocation? This moves the investigation from engineering into the realm of ancient public health, adding a profound new layer to our understanding of why systems were maintained or abandoned. This acknowledgement of the unknown is not an admission of failure, but the essence of the scientific journey. It confirms that reconstructing the past is not a puzzle with a single, final picture. It is an endless frontier where each answered question reveals three more. The next breakthrough might come from a new remote sensing technology that can peer deeper into the earth, or from a local farmer remembering an old story about a hidden spring now paved over. It underscores that history is not a closed book, but a living dialogue. Every dry riverbed and forgotten well shaft holds a potential clue, waiting for the right moment and the right curious mind to give it a voice once more. Across the deserts, mountains, and jungles, a single intellectual current flows. The true hidden engineering was not merely in the stone or the tunnel, but in a shared way of seeing the world. Having traced the global map of ancient water systems, we can now distill a universal wisdom, a set of principles that guided hands from Rome to Rajasthan. These are not blueprints for specific technologies, but the foundational philosophies that made those technologies possible. First, and perhaps most profound, is the principle of harmony with natural gradients. Whether it was the Roman surveyor calculating a minuscule slope for his aqueduct or the Persian muqani tunneling upward just enough to let gravity do the work, these engineers did not fight the land's inherent logic. They listened to it. They understood that water, left to its own devices, seeks the path of least resistance. Their genius was in guiding that path with exquisite subtlety, using the land's own shape as their primary tool. This stands in stark contrast to our modern tendency to flatten, reroute, and overpower landscapes with immense energy. They worked with gravity as a partner, not an obstacle. The second principle is the non-negotiable imperative of long-term maintenance. Every civilization we have studied, from the Indus Valley to Angkor, invested not just in construction, but in the social and bureaucratic machinery for upkeep. They understood that a water system is not a monument you build and forget. It is a living process, a covenant with the future. the Roman water commissioner Frontinus, the Khmer corvée labor rotations, the communal agreements around a Qanat all point to this same truth. The engineering was only as strong as the ongoing commitment to care for it. This reveals a long-term mindset that viewed infrastructure as a perpetual responsibility, a thread connecting generations. The third unifying thread is the seamless integration of utility and symbolism. For these cultures, water was never just H2O. It was a divine gift, a cosmic metaphor, a proof of political legitimacy. The Maya king's sacred reservoir, the Roman nymphaeum proclaiming imperial bounty, the Khmer barre mirroring the sea of milk, all demonstrate that the most effective systems served the spirit as powerfully as they served the soil. The practical and the profound were engineered together. This fusion made the infrastructure culturally resilient, embedding it in stories, rituals, and identity, ensuring it mattered beyond its mere function. Finally, underpinning everything was a relentless reliance on precise, localized observation. This was science before the laboratory. It was the ancestral Puebloan noting exactly which arroyo caught the most silt after a storm, the Mesopotamian farmer tracking the salt crust on his field, the Qanat digger learning the sound of water-bearing rock. Their knowledge was hyper-specific, born from generations of watching a particular spring, a specific hillside, a unique rainfall pattern. They became intimate experts of their own micro-environments, and their designs reflected that deep, place-based intelligence. When we step back and view these principles together, a stunning realization emerges. The ancient hydraulic engineer was above all a master systems thinker. They did not see a water source in isolation. They saw a complex, dynamic web where a mountain catchment connected to an aquifer, which fed a canal, which irrigated a field, which fed a city, which in turn organized the labor to maintain the canal. They understood the feedback loops. They knew that deforestation upstream could silt a reservoir downstream, that a social conflict could break the maintenance cycle, that a shift in climate could test the entire design. Their perspective was inherently holistic. They engineered not just water, but the entire relationship between water, land, and community. This is perhaps their most significant and hidden feat. In an age of increasing specialization, where hydrologists, civil engineers, urban planners, and ecologists often work in separate silos, this ancient, integrated vision feels both radical and desperately needed. It suggests that the most advanced system is not the one with the most sophisticated parts, but the one that most intelligently connects them. Their legacy, therefore, is not merely a catalogue of clever gadgets. It is an invitation to recover a way of thinking, to see our own water challenges not as isolated technical problems, but as puzzles of interconnection, demanding solutions that are as socially aware and ecologically attuned as they are structurally sound. This synthesized wisdom forms the ultimate blueprint we have been reconstructing all along, a map not of pipes but of perspective. The legacy of these ancient systems flows not in their stone but in their philosophy. Our journey across continents and centuries reveals a profound truth, that the greatest feats of engineering were not acts of domination, but of profound dialogue. These civilizations did not see a river as an obstacle to be conquered, but as a partner in a perpetual conversation. They listened to the whispers of the aquifer, observed the patience of gravity, and mapped the language of the rain. What they built were not just channels and reservoirs, but physical manifestations of a partnership with the natural world. This conversation was written in the gentle slope of a Qanat, designed to coax water forth without force. It was etched into the communal laws of Mesopotamia, which recognized that a shared resource demanded shared responsibility. It resonated in the sacred reservoirs of the Maya, where water was both a physical necessity and a spiritual covenant. Each system, from the Roman aqueduct to the Andean terrace, was a unique dialect in this global language of adaptation. The clues they left behind in sunken canals and satellite shadows are more than archaeological artifacts. They are pages from a forgotten manual on resilience. This manual does not prescribe a single solution, for the deserts of Persia demanded a different strategy than the monsoon lands of Cambodia. Instead, it offers a set of timeless principles, a toolkit for thinking. It teaches the value of designing with the landscape, not against it. It underscores the non-negotiable need for long-term stewardship, where maintenance is a sacred generational duty. And it champions a holistic vision where water management is inseparable from social cohesion, spiritual meaning, and ecological awareness. For us, living in an age of escalating climate uncertainty and water stress, this recovered wisdom is not a relic, it is a revelation. We stand at a similar crossroads, facing the same elemental challenge of securing a vital, finite resource. Our modern solutions are powerful, but they often rely on immense energy and centralized control, creating systems that can be both brittle and blind to their long-term consequences. The ancient engineers whisper a compelling alternative, a call to integrate rather than isolate, to design for durability rather than short-term efficiency. They remind us that sustainability is not a new technology but an ancient mindset. As you turn from this story, consider the hidden waterways in your own world. Trace the journey of a single drop from your tap back to its source. Think about the unseen pipes, the treatment plants, the distant reservoirs or deep aqueducts that make your daily life possible. How might the principles of harmony, maintenance, and integrated design apply to the systems we depend on today? The conversation with water never truly ends, it only changes form. Our task is to ensure it remains a dialogue, not a monologue. If this exploration of humanity's deep past and its urgent lessons has sparked your curiosity, I invite you to join our community for more journeys into the mysteries that shape our world. Let us know in the comments which ancient water marvel, from the stepwells of India to the canals of Angkor, captured your imagination the most. Thank you for listening and for thinking deeply about the currents that connect us all.